Wednesday afternoon, guys. My name is Jerry Miller, and welcome to the I Love CVille show. It's great to be with you. We're live in Charlottesville, the Commonwealth, the country, and the world on the I Love CVille network, and we're presented by Ting Fiber Internet. Crazy fast internet, Ting Fiber Internet, the best deal possible through I Love CVille at ilovecville.ting.com. A $288 savings, guys. This is going to be a good show. It's an important show. What we've been trying to do in 2021 is to introduce you to the candidates that are running for positions that matter. And from our standpoint at the I Love CVille Network, local government has the most impact on our lives. City Council and Albemarle County Board of Supervisors in particular. We're going to talk Charlottesville for the next half hour or so. There are two spots that are up for grabs on council. November 3rd, the general election. And those are the seats for Mayor Nakia Walker and Councilor Heather Hill. Councilor Hill has already identified and let us all know that she will not run for re-election. Mayor Walker has said she will run for re-election. She has said she will not run for re-election. If I'm reading the tea leaves correctly, she will be back in the mix, most likely, without question, as an independent. However, that means we have a very competitive Democratic race. We've introduced you to some candidates already, including the breaking news that Carl Brown is in the mix, that Yaz Washington is in the mix, news that we broke here on the show. Juan Diego Wade and Brian Pinkston also in the mix for two spots. Judah Wickhauer is our director. Why don't we go to the studio camera and welcome Brian Pinkston, just one of the very kind, good people here in Charlottesville. Brian Pinkston, good afternoon. How are you?
I'm very good. Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it. It's always good to be here.
It's our pleasure.
Yeah.
Thank you for coming.
Yeah, you do such a great service for the community, so thank you for that.
Thank you for saying that.
Yeah.
Brian Pinkston, students in the city, in school, what do you think?
Yeah, I think that I'm glad that my children are young adults and not in school age, which is not a very good answer, I suppose. But I think that I was on the downtown mall yesterday with Juan Diego, and people were coming up and talking with him about the decision. And I just know that the school board has had to really weigh this, and it's been hard. That's why we elect school board members, so that you've got parents and family and folks involved who can weigh in on this. That's why having an active participation in the school board meetings by parents is so valuable. I was at a petition signing event on Saturday that the Democrats are having. You've got to get 125 signatures on a petition to get your name on the ballot. So anyway, the Dems were hosting something on Saturday, and what was really cool was to see all the new potential school board members. So they're just cutting their teeth. They're interested. They're concerned. I'm sure that they disagree with some things that the school board has done this year, but the main thing is that they're putting their name in the hat to make their voices heard. So I was really impressed with that. You've got some really strong, good candidates stepping up.
How about as a dad? You mentioned off air before the show, a father of three. Mm-hmm. How about as a dad with the kids in school? I mean, just as a parent.
Yeah, I think that it's probably been past time for the kids to go back to school. That would be my sense from the reading that I've done. Again, yes, my kids they've been able to do virtual school. My youngest is in PVCC. My oldest is going to school at a school over in Rome, Italy, actually, but he's doing his work from my couch. But with the students, that particularly for students that are less privileged, African American students that perhaps are poorer, having that face-to-face time with teachers is really important. I realize there's so much to weigh with the teachers, and vaccinations and so forth. I also know that the CDC, and particularly with the administration we had before, one we have now, there was a lot of mixed signals in terms of direction that was given. I mean, how do you have a classroom and people keep 6 feet away from each other? So all of that is to say that I think that the democratic process, when we have a school board that's represented by parents, that's where people need to make the call. And I guess for me, I would have made the call a little earlier, but it's easy for me to say.
Well, I respect that. I'm from your camp as well. I think the numbers back it up.
Yep.
That's not to say that we're not supportive of teachers. We understand, or we try to understand the plight of teachers,
Yep.
which they're certainly heroes.
Yep.
As a father myself, I'd love to see my little boy around other kids learning as well.
Right.
Such a precarious position, such a tough decision. One of the things I learned in 2020 is that everyone's right was unique to them.
Yeah, that's right.
What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think that's so true. Yeah, particularly in the city. You know, it's interesting when I was knocking on doors 2 years ago, the city is full of people with big hearts and big brains. You know, there's a lot of bright people here, a lot of opinionated people, and usually when you talk with them, they're able to give very good reasons why their particular case makes a lot of sense. And one of the things that I would note as I walked through the city is I would talk to one person at one house, and their neighbor a few houses down had a completely different, it was like a little mini universe. And the only way and this really puts elected officials in a hard place, people themselves need to talk and try to come to some level of agreement. So I think the school board members, city council members, elected officials in general are often asked to solve problems that really individual citizens need to try to resolve. But I think that you're right. And so trying to figure out, good compromises, trying to think in terms of what respect means for other people, trying to empathy, those sorts of things, the things you're supposed to be taught in kindergarten. I just think that that's so important. I've been very grateful at the national level, at the federal level, that we're getting some very clear statements, things that should not have been like controversial, like consistent mask wearing and things like that, and social distancing. So that I think that's going to make a big difference, honestly. So I'm optimistic.
You have every media outlet in town watching
Cool.
you here. I'll throw this to you. Vaccine distribution, Blue Ridge Health District, how you thought it's gone, vaccines and creating consumer confidence, which is something we certainly need to stimulate the economy. And also, have you had an opportunity yourself to get the vaccination?
I have. And
Oh, you did? Congratulations.
Yeah, and I'll tell you the reason why. It's interesting. In the previous world, you'd be like, well, people are sort of skittish about vaccines. And now everyone's like, yeah, I want to get the vaccine. I was able to do it because I work in facilities management at the university, and I have from time to time projects over in the health system. So that's the reason I was able to do it.
Your better half as well?
No.
Okay, so you solo?
Just me.
Did you did you get the 2-shot one?
I did.
Yes, are you 1 or 2 in?
I'm 2 in.
Congratulations.
Yeah, I know. So that it's one of these things where it's like you almost don't want to admit it because you got in front of so many other people. But I figured it was an opportunity. I do work in context around patients from time to time, and I also want to do my part to build herd immunity. I'm like, if I've got a shot to get it, and no pun intended, I'm going to take it.
I think you did the right move, right?
Yeah.
I can understand why you feel bad because, frankly, you're a nice person,
Yeah.
and you don't want someone else getting you getting the shot that could go to someone else.
Sure.
What do you make about the vaccines and how they've been distributed around the town? And then the second part of the question is, can they create the consumer confidence we need to help the industries we love, like restaurants and hospitality and music? Because, Brian, we both know that restaurants, hospitality, and music are the fields or the spaces that help create the diversity for Charlottesville.
Right. Yeah, and it's interesting, too, when you think about, if you step back a second and talk about equity, let's just talk about equity. And so-called essential workers, most of those essential workers were folks who were sort of at the bottom rungs, folks that are in a more precarious situation like waiters and waitresses and so forth. And so folks from that sort of block being unable to, right off the bat, losing their jobs and then being sort of the last to come back on. I think that, yeah, I mean, I do feel like as we move forward, we're going to have a better, more consistent distribution of the vaccine and that the economy will pick back up. But I guess the point that I want to make is there are a lot of things that have just been unfair the last year. I've been able to work from home if I wanted to. I've chosen to go into the office, but I didn't have to. Many people weren't able to do that, and so they lost their jobs or they lost income. And so I think what this does is it just reinforces, it brings back to the fore the fact that not only our city but our country has these massive inequalities built into it. Going back to the schools, my daughter was fortunate enough to be asked to be a pod manager, so to speak, a tutor for like 5 children. And she really enjoyed it. It's been a great experience for her and for these children. But, again, these children had an opportunity that perhaps others did not.
They had resources.
Yeah, and so, right. So they're paying my daughter $20 an hour. So I think what this does is I think every situation should, like after the events of August 2017, we need to take stock, right? And we took stock then, and I think people are taking stock now about the last year and how it's impacted people, particularly those that are less privileged.
My fear is with COVID, all the work that we've all tried to do as a community with, say, closing the wealth gap or bridging some social justice inequalities, COVID has further created the divide. You mentioned schools.
Yeah.
Let's take Charlottesville.
Right.
The Covenant School and St. Anne's Belfield, it's school as normal, with students learning with their peers in a classroom ahead of 2019 or 2019 from an academic standpoint.
Right.
A lot of the public schools, it's the complete opposite.
Right.
And I guess our fear is the work we have of bridging and closing the gap, we're going to have to double down and do even more.
Right.
What are your thoughts on that?
I think you're exactly right. I think I completely agree. That's why I think in the next budgets that come up post-COVID, we really need to look carefully at the things that we're prioritizing. I am a project manager. I love infrastructure. I love streets. I love pipes and conduits under the road. I love all those things. I love parking garages. Those things. But I think we're going to need to. I was looking at the budget last night, the latest budget, and the revenue shortfalls that are being projected, and people come first, students come first. And so I've also been looking at the Seville Plans Together website, the affordable housing plan that was just endorsed by City Council. So I guess my point is that for me, I'm going to prioritize things like the affordable housing plan, which has many components. It's not just writing a check for $10 million every year, but it's various pieces of it. I'm going to prioritize things like the school reconfiguration, programs with the school. And then the other pieces, we'll just have to see how that works out. So I think, too, leveraging the nonprofit sector in this community is really important. I was fortunate enough to speak with Ravi Rasputo with United Way the other day, and the work that they're doing, knitting all of these disparate groups and efforts together with the city to create to improve the social safety net. Unfortunately, the United States, we don't have a great social safety net. We've opted to go the more hyper-individualistic route. And so when a situation like this happens, we see the limitations of that. But, fortunately, people like the United Way and groups like that are, they're doing really good work, working in between those gaps. And so I think that, for instance, the ABRT, the agency board that's supposed to coordinate these efforts, I think, being proactive and thoughtful and working with those groups is really going to be important.
Brian Pinkston, guys, our guest on the I Love Seville show. Some of your donors watching the program. I see Trip Stewart watching the program here. Vanessa Parkhill watching the program as well. Neil Williamson from Free Enterprise Forum watching the program. Brian Pinkston for another 15 or 20 minutes here on the show. So you led me into a lot of the topics I wanted to ask you. If we have a limited budget, which we know we do, and we have a limited budget because of the impact COVID has had on the economy, we're not going to be able to do all the stuff we've been trying to do. I learned from Kathy Galvin that the West Main Streetscape project has been in the quote-unquote hopper since 1988.
Yeah, I believe it.
So it's been in the hopper for, you're better at math than is that 40-some years right there?
Yeah, that's right.
So walk with me of school reconfiguration, because this is not easy. And
That's right.
I don't
It's
want to
not
be in your
easy.
shoes. I have
It's
empathy.
like the school board decisions,
Right.
right? I mean, we just were talking about.
Yeah.
It's not easy.
It's not easy.
Right. I mean, you're choosing between what's the less bad alternative.
Exactly.
And that's why you're not paid the big bucks, I guess.
You should be paid the big bucks because the
Yeah.
decisions you're making
Right.
are so hard,
Right.
and unfortunately are going to upset probably a large chunk of the
No
population.
matter what you do, and that's one of the things
Yeah.
I learned when I was knocking on doors, 3,700 doors last time. It's just the fact that, and that's just human nature. It's human nature that you see the world kind of through your own prism and lens, and it's really hard to put that together with other people's lived experiences. That's why I really appreciated what Mr. Brown had to say on your show the other day about how we all have different narratives that we bring to this mix, and I think that that's really important for people to keep in mind. But yeah, I understand Kathy's point, and we have not yet had a conversation about this. I think the world of Kathy. I admire her a lot. I would say the schools have been in the hopper for a long time. 2 years ago, when I was doing my research, like $500 million had been invested in school infrastructure in the surrounding communities, like the whatever radius you want to draw around Charlottesville in the last decade. And we've done. I mean, we maintain our schools, but I think that's just nuts. I think that the plan that's been put forward by the school board is a robust, reasonable, thoughtful way. It addresses the issues with the buildings themselves. They're old. And it also is thoughtful about issues like equity and how you minimize transitions and how you, it's very, I think, student-centric.
Are we fearful or concerned? I guess fearful is not the right word. Are we concerned that the money from UVA or the Commonwealth for the West Main Streetscape project, that we're going to lose that opportunity? I learned from former counselor Kathy Galvin that if we don't pick up the $18 million from the Commonwealth, it's a $52 million project, West Main Streetscape roughly. Virginia Commonwealth is agreeing to contribute $18 million. If we don't get that $18 million, it would go to Orange County for a roundabout. And I didn't know that. She taught me that.
Yeah,
And
I'm
Orange
sure
County,
that's true. If Kathy told you that,
she would
it's
know.
true. Yeah.
So Orange County is like chomping at the bit and hoping that the city
Right.
of Charlottesville does
Right.
not take this
Yeah.
$18 million
Yeah,
bucks.
sure.
What do you think about this?
Well, I think, the folks from Orange County, when they come to Charlottesville, they need to identify, if they're going to, I'm just kidding. No, I think that I have not looked into the details of all of those things, and this is where I'm going to sort of say I need to think about it
Sure.
more. There will always be these hard choices about opportunity cost. If we don't do this, then someone else will take advantage of it. Or there's always going to be those sorts of second order effects. I'm not sure the fact that we lose money necessarily, what direct implication that has on affordable housing proper per se with us at this moment, for instance. But, I'll have to think about that more.
I respect
it's
that.
a really good point that if other people have stepped up and said, okay, we're going to give you this amount of money, we're matching funds, you are in essence losing money. And I think that's a really good point, and framing it in those terms makes it more convincing to me that we should do it.
Right.
But it's a little like the parking garage. For me, I'm not sure. I was talking to a local business owner that you would know the other day, and he was saying that he's not so sure we need all this extra parking downtown. But the thing to me that's important is meeting our commitment to Albemarle County.
Oh, okay.
So now there are other ways we can do that. Perhaps I'm sure there are other ways we can manage that. I don't know enough about that particular project to know all the pros and cons, but it is important to me that we meet our commitments. I think that if one council makes a decision, people from the outside need to know that we're true to our word.
I think it's also good for institutional memory, institutional inspiration, and to show the staff in City Hall that if one council's working on something, we'll see it through to the finish line.
That's right.
From a morale standpoint.
That's exactly right.
Parking garage. Anything you want to offer there? Because I know this is going to be a topic throughout your campaign.
Yeah, I will say that is a topic I need to do more thoughtful research on.
Okay.
I'm interested, what is the sort of consensus of the downtown establishment? I mean, they feel like we need it, I guess?
So I can offer some perspective on this
I'd appreciate
from the ties to the DBAC and business owner downtown. So Councilor Snook was in your seat about a couple weeks ago, and I consider what he says quite a bit, and he made the comment that until we see what happens with COVID from a downtown demand standpoint, that
That's
we
right.
can't build that garage
That's right.
because we have limited funds. The alternative path to this is there's a backup option for the county, and it's
Right.
either 90 or 100 spots in the Market
Right.
Street garage,
That's right.
and it's given some money back for that land where the Guadalajara and the Lucky Seven are. This is something I want to throw to you, though. If we don't commit to potentially building the parking downtown, and we go down the road of potentially this outdoor refreshment area that I want to ask you about,
Okay.
I think we have potentially a log jam of parking then.
Right.
And then the second part is there still is this perception in town for some reason that parking downtown is difficult. And many of the merchants say their businesses are being impacted because of a lack of parking downtown.
right.
So you have a perception issue.
Right.
And then you have this opportunity down the road where I think if you get on council, you guys are going to approve the downtown mall being an outdoor refreshment area.
Right, which
And if-
totally changes the,
It changes the
Yeah.
game.
Yeah.
So if you green light an outdoor refreshment area, and I truly think you have a very good chance of being on this council.
Right.
And if you guys green light this outdoor refreshment area because Richmond and the governor just allowed it.
I saw that.
And the DBAC is chomping at the bit for this.
right,
Then we have a parking conundrum.
right. Well, do we? I mean, I haven't read the studies. I'm assuming that there are parking studies that exist. Again, I was just talking to a guy that I respect a lot, that you would know, local businessman, who is saying, when he's looking for parking, he never, and this is all anecdotal, but when he's
Sure.
looking for parking spots, he's normally able to find one. If you invest money in a fixed structure like that, is that the best use versus some other initiative like, if we want to be a city that's progressive in terms of, cars are not a good thing, right?
Yeah, that's the argument there, yeah.
Cars are not a good thing, and I get the fact that we all want to park, and that's the American dream, right? I have five adults in my house. We have 3 cars. In a perfect world, I suppose we'd have 5 cars, but I'd rather have a moped. And so
You do?
I do.
Yeah.
It needs a little maintenance right now, but anyway, I do. And so this is not much of an answer, but I'm trying to give you sort of the lens through which I would approach this problem, right?
Sure.
I think that if we want to be a green city, if we want to do more to help with transportation, I think we really need to think hard about other options. Maybe I think Lloyd suggested this a couple of years ago. Having
The ride share, park and share.
something like that.
Yeah.
Changing people's behavior. It's like they teach you in MBA school. I've not been to business school, but I read a book recently that's sort of this, focusing on pain points, right? If you can find the pain points for people when it comes to parking, what's difficult, and you give them a different solution that they find just as easy. It's like, and this is probably a terrible example, but it's like, going from the mindset of depositing a check to having to go to the bank, then to the ATM, and now you can do it on your phone, right? Thinking in those terms, if there are ways in which we can change the approach around parking downtown. I
respect that.
I have some concerns about investing in one more big thing downtown that's going to take up land, that's going to cost money, and I'm just not sure it's the best decision all the way around. Now, the business community may, drop me like a hot potato after that comment. I hope not. But commerce is very important to me, and I just want to make sure we're not setting up these contradictions that are not really there.
And you're saying that the contradiction is Charlottesville's committed to being a green city that cares about the environment, but at the same time is spending $15 million when it doesn't have the money because of a COVID deficit to house cars. That you say that's a contradiction.
Well, no, that's part of the contradiction. But the other contradiction is I don't want people downtown, the business. One of the things that's really important to me is re-energizing. This has been mentioned, a downtown reinvestment plan.
I was going to ask you about that.
Yeah, I'm fully behind that. I think that this narrative that often gets pulled up, particularly with the activists, at city council meetings, about how anytime the downtown business folks ask for money, it's like these greedy capitalists or something. That's silly.
Yeah.
People in the downtown.
Thank you for saying that.
Yeah, the people in the downtown mall they not only pump in tax dollars. There's more than that. They bring people to the city. I was just here on Sunday with Juan getting petitions signed, and these, maybe 1 out of 5 couples we talked to were from Charlottesville. The rest were visiting, and they like it. They think it's beautiful, and so and one person asked, "Where's the public bathroom?" Well, I had just heard about that a few weeks ago, the DBAC meeting, and I'd want that
Downtown Business Owners Association.
Yeah. About the fact that there's no public bathroom. Well, that's nuts,
Right.
And so I think doing the simple things like that, I mean, don't get me wrong, it would cost a lot of money to put a bathroom, but compared to the total of what's needed and lighting and stuff, so seeing, I don't know, I just hear a lot of drama, for lack of a better word, between the downtown business community and the people in City Hall. There's clearly not a close coordination there, and there should be. That, to me, seems like really low-hanging fruit it's just win-win. And so I don't understand, there's some of the past history with that.
I respect that so much. Can we cut that into a highlight reel, please? People need to hear that we can play throughout the week. I respect that so much. So what are your ideas for stimulating arguably the most important 8 blocks in Charlottesville? And whenever I say that on the show, people say, what about UVA? UVA is in Albemarle County. The most important 8 blocks in the city of Charlottesville, the downtown mall. How do you stimulate them? Because I walk by them. I've been here since 2000, Brian.
Yeah.
We have a 25% vacancy rate.
Yeah, right.
And in a healthy economy, the vacancy rate's below 1%.
Right.
So we're over 25x where we're supposed to be.
Right. Yeah, I think that, and this is sort of an intangible thing, but doing everything I can to change the sort of conversation from one of opposition. 2 years ago, one of the first people I went to talk to was Joan Fenton. And then, 2 years later, I'm sitting in the DBAC meeting, and the same sorts of concerns are coming up, and I found it very frustrating. And so I don't know how to I think those larger questions about vacancies and so forth are going to that's more of a long-term thing that will rectify itself. I think sometimes, one of the good parts of COVID is it's taught us how to work remotely, and maybe we don't need to build as many parking decks or office space that's just sitting empty. So if the world has truly changed fundamentally in that way, that's not a bad thing. But the core to me is having a vibrant commercial center, and I think that having some anchoring buildings like the Code building downtown, I was speaking with some folks about that the other day. I think those are great things, and those owners are going into this really is remarkable. The sense I get is they're going into this with the community in mind. They're not like trying to just, take advantage.
Yeah,
So-
Joffrey Woodruff, guys, is the vision behind the Code building, the former Ice Park. Code is an acronym for Center of Developing Entrepreneurs. That building comes to market soon. It's going to house Joffrey's portfolio of businesses, among other things, and the hope, fingers crossed for us downtown, that a couple hundred people in this Code building will help stimulate the 8 blocks that is the Charlottesville Downtown Mall. Vanessa Parkhill, Kelly Lewis, enjoy what they're saying. Quentin Beckham, who's the president of the Charlottesville Albemarle Association of Realtors and a good friend of this program, says, hello, Brian, with 2 exclamation points.
He's a good friend of mine.
Yeah, Quentin Beckham is
Yeah.
A-plus people.
Yeah,
We
he
love
is.
you, Quentin
Yeah.
Beckham, QB on this program.
Yeah.
All right, so I guess I'll throw this to you. Kind of a pointed, wow, you're very popular. You got more questions coming in here. I'll get to this question that was just texted to me here. So do you say yes? Would you vote, if you're elected, okay, would you vote yes for the outdoor refreshment area for downtown?
Well, I mean, it's like all things. If you ask a question in a vacuum, the clear answer is yeah, obviously. I would like to know more about it.
Sure,
I'd like some more context. But it certainly seems, particularly if the governor is on board with it, it seems like a no-brainer situation. I think that we would need to be thoughtful about the implications. I mean, if you're going to have that, then maybe you really do need some extra bathrooms. And maybe you do need to invest in lighting and the things that I continue to.
I think you guys could monetize this.
Well, yeah. Yeah.
You know, you have a point of contact in the mall.
Yeah.
Sell a $5 bracelet, $5 cup.
Yeah.
The money goes to the city, and then you're driving all the business to the restaurants, and then the city gets the back end money from the food and beverage taxes.
Yeah. Yeah, I just think it's a win-win. I mean, there's obviously things we need to think about, and I would want to know what those are before I signed off. But on the face of it, prima facie, absolutely, it seems like a really great idea. But for me, I think all those things are important. I just hope with downtown business and with commerce that we can get past some of these, I don't know, misunderstandings, we'll call them, where the downtown business community is often demonized, I think, or seen as the enemy.
I feel like we are.
I don't know if it's, I've got my undergraduates in engineering, but my graduate degrees are in the humanities. And I don't know if it's some sort of leftover thing from the university community that's this kind of anti-commerce or.
When did the businessman, and this is me speaking for myself.
Right.
When did the businessman that's committed, or the businesswoman, that's committed to running a business in the black for profit to hire people and to give them raises and then also give tax revenue to the city, when did that person become the enemy?
It makes no sense. I was talking to someone the other night on the phone. I can't remember her name, but anyway, she's owns a local construction company. And you could just hear, this is changing the topic slightly, but you could just hear the sort of despair in her voice talking about getting building permits. You know, and it's a little different, but it's still similar. You know, you've got entrepreneurs who are trying to, I've not met an entrepreneur in the city or a business person that I thought was out to gouge anybody. People love the city like you, you know. And so where was I going with that? I don't understand. I don't understand why I continue to hear these sort of frictions between the city government and commerce. And I understand with developers, we need to be thoughtful about what we just can't do any and everything. But simple things like getting building permits, you know, that just should, if there's not enough staff, we need to hire enough staff. This is, you know, we aspire to be a world-class city. We need the staff I'm in this world every day at UVA, to review project plans, to get them permitted, making that efficient. I was talking with someone, again, another person, who was like, I would just change just about everything around the building if it meant I didn't have to engage with city council or with, you know, and, you know, that makes no sense. And I'm sure that there are some good reasons within the city historically. I'm not trying to throw anybody under the bus or be harsh, but I really think we need to, when we talk about what it means to be progressive, I think we need to bring back the notion that competency is a progressive virtue. There's nothing, you know.
Progressiveness has been associated with activism and destruction, as opposed to building and leading.
Right. I mean, if you look at Joe Biden, for instance, I mean, he's not everyone's idea of a progressive, but I mean, he's going to make a lot of progress. You know, the stimulus plan that he just got through. So, you know, Kamala Harris. And so, yeah, I agree with you, and I care about progressivism. I mean, I grew up in the South. I grew up very politically and religiously conservative. I'm now vice chair of the Democratic Party in the city. I mean, I care about progressive values. But it's one thing to talk, and activism has its place. I see activism as like the voice of our conscience, saying, hey, you need to think about housing. Hey, you need to think about policing. Hey, you need to think about the environment. But your conscience is very important, but you've got to put your conscience together with, okay, what makes sense? How do we get from here to there? I don't know if that analogy makes sense.
That makes perfect sense. Yeah. And I love what you're saying here. And I'm going to ask you a tough question.
Okay.
Does activism deserve a spot on council?
You know, I think when you put on a different hat,
What does that mean?
right. So I think that when people vote you into office and you have submitted yourself in a way to the will of the people, and said that I'm going to lead not just for a certain subset or not just for a certain perspective, but for the overall good of the community, then that does not mean you shouldn't advocate for, that you can't use maybe this is not the right term, the bully pulpit. It doesn't mean you can't be vocal. And
Your influence.
You should. But there comes a point where you have to set that, I think, into a box and say, okay, this box, this is important to me, but it's one thing among many. And I'll tell you who I've been just impressed as I can be with is Michael Payne. You know, Michael is Democratic Socialist. You know, he beat me 2 years ago, and he's an activist, community organizer. But I'll tell you, in the conversations I've had with him, I've just been impressed with he's made the switch. He understands why it's important to have a strong city manager. He understands the importance of having good staffing. He used the phrase, personnel is policy. You know, well, that's right. That's business 101. If you don't have, you can have really great, all kinds of great ideas and even have the money. But if you don't have the right people in place to execute them, it doesn't work.
You brought up your assessment of Councilor Michael Payne. How about your assessment of the mayor, who's an opponent in this race here? And I've been very critical. And this is me. This is not you. I say this for a reason. Okay, I want everyone who comes on this show to feel safe. I'm not going to shock jock him here by putting him in a spot with a tough question on the mayor. I've said this, and people know who watch this show. I felt that there's a place for activism in the community, and we undoubtedly need activists in this community. But the place for activism in the mayor's seat, those don't go hand in hand.
Right.
I feel the mayor, the number one person from a perception standpoint in this town, should be leading the collective whole.
Right.
And not going into the New York Times and saying Charlottesville is an ugly to the soul kind of place.
Yeah.
This is my take. I'm not putting you in the spot here.
Well, I would say that I agree with that. That's the simple answer. I agree with what you just said. If the mayor were instead a counselor, you know, like a Councilman
That's different.
Bellamy,
Yeah.
West Bellamy, then I would feel like a person in that position, even though they do need to think about the whole community, if they're in that position, then they do have more freedom.
Yes.
Right? But if you're the mayor, yes, this is a city manager form of government, so forth and so on. We realize that we don't have a strong mayor form of government, but there's a lot of informal, intangible power that goes along with saying you're the mayor of Charlottesville. And so even if an issue is deeply important to you, I think that I largely agree with you. You have to set that aside when you go into a meeting, and you have to, when you're representing the community, like you said with the New York Times. Now, I'm not here to beat the mayor.
Sure, I understand.
I respect the mayor.
I know you do.
I think, to be honest with you, I think that I see what she's done in terms of, her campaign motto was
Unmask the illusion.
Yeah, I think she's done a really good job of that.
She is doing what exactly she said she would do.
Right, and I think that yes, I think that the critique that she's brought has been overdue, and I think we all owe her our debt of gratitude for that. But it is one thing to critique; it's another to build, and I think she's built as well. I'm not here to criticize the mayor, but I do think that you're right that the office of mayor is important, and you have to be very careful in mixing all of that up. And so what it's interesting. In this race, I'll be looks like the only not a person of color, which is honestly for me concerning, because I don't want to be that guy that is like, I realize privilege is a thing, right? And I grew up in the Deep South, and I'm not black, I'm not a person of color, but want to be deeply empathetic to those voices, right? And so walking into this whole thing, I want to be respectful to Yaz Washington and to Carl Brown, and obviously Juan Diego is my friend, and to the mayor in terms of their perspectives about the city. What I really loved about some of the things that Mr. Brown said on your program was this notion of different narratives. And he said, don't tell me what my narrative is. I think he was probably talking to the mayor. My narrative is I grew up in Charlottesville as a black man, and it was largely a positive experience, and I grew from it. And I have a different narrative, right? I came here, I'm the sort of quintessential, professional that came to town to get a graduate degree and stayed. And I want to be respectful of the fact that my narrative, my story has and can do damage to other people and their stories, and I want to just be thoughtful and empathetic and careful about that. At the same time, I think I do have something to offer. I think that a person with a project management background, I've got engineering and other graduate degrees, I think that I bring something to this space that would be valuable for city council. And I'm not going to, the fact that I do have privilege or whatever the term of art is today, I'm not going to let that detract from that. I'm going to use that to advance those in the city who have the most need.
It was a fantastic answer.
Oh, thanks.
Seriously.
Yeah.
Can you turn that into a highlight clip, please, Judah? No, seriously. You're very, we've had 5 or 6 conversations in front of cameras. You're very composed and relaxed and calm
thanks.
and confident.
I appreciate you saying it.
I like it.
It's all my campaign staff back home. Hey, Isaac.
Isaac does a good job. He sent us a press release with some endorsements and a headshot for the show. Isaac, excellent work.
I want to tell you, I've got a new campaign manager that Isaac put me on to, Gia Abernathy.
Okay.
She's a 4th year at UVA.
Nice.
Another one of these just brilliant people that UVA produces. She's helping us. You probably know Alex Bryant.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's helping us.
Yeah.
Tom Vandiver, I'm sure you know Tom.
I do.
He's helping us. Jonathan Stevens. So I've just got this crackerjack team I've walked into who people are helping me. So if I lose this time, it'll be on me.
Yeah, I have so many questions I got to throw to you. I'm mindful of your time. There's a lot of questions
That's
from
fine.
viewers.
Okay, go for it.
Mark McKinney, who's on the show tomorrow, wants your take on the revenue sharing agreement. He says, is it time for the city of Charlottesville and Albemarle to address an agreement that's in place for 40 years? And Mark says roughly $266 million has been given to the city from Albemarle County since 2001.
So I assume he lives in the county.
He does.
Right.
He's a huge evangelist and champion of Albemarle County, in particular Crozet. He watches the show routinely. He's coming on tomorrow. Very smart guy.
Yeah, I'm sure he is. I don't know all of the background for the revenue sharing agreement. I read about it a couple years ago. I have a general sense of it. I will say this. I feel like that Albemarle, Greene, any county around here gets more than it invests from Charlottesville. I mean, we've got the university here. Yes, it's on Albemarle County land, but some of it's on Charlottesville land, to be honest. I've seen the records. But to me, those sorts of things, the specifics, yeah, it's probably worth every 10 years revisiting an agreement that came up with, I don't know, he says 40 years ago. Nope, that's fine. But the notion that Albemarle County doesn't get something from the city is, I think, just false. I mean, we're in this together. Now, I'm not saying that, yeah, I know Albemarle County has its needs. I believe in regionalism, So I don't have a problem with the question. I think that it's a fair point to always ask, but I just want to bring up this notion of the common good. I think if there's a way to find a compromise there that goes from this, it's kind of like, in a marriage, once you start having his and her towels or whatever, once you start dividing everything down the middle like that, then you've lost trust. And so I would like to have a conversation with this gentleman and say, what is it that specifically concerns you? Can we restructure this in thoughtful ways? But how do we think win-win? What is good for Albemarle County? I want to know what's good for Albemarle County, because what's good for Albemarle County would be good for the city too, right? So,
That was a good answer.
yeah, I mean, that comes up every few years, and my guess is that there, I don't know, there was a good reason for it when it was first introduced. My guess is that the basic underlying logic has probably not changed much. It's probably still a good deal for both sides if you look at it that way. So,
Alexandra Phillips has a comment. She lives in the city of Charlottesville in Johnson Village. Jerry, I've watched this entire interview with Mr. Pinkston. Tell him I appreciate his empathy. Ask him this, please. When I watch the council meetings, I cannot get beyond the bickering to listen to what they're actually talking about. How will he solve this? Because this is an important issue. If all we see is arguing, how are we going to move forward as a city?
yeah, it's a really good point. And I think, I do believe it's more of a perception than a reality. I think that behind the scenes, people, they don't loathe each other.
Yeah.
One thing that I think is really important for people to remember, I had someone ask me about this with the school board recently, like, why didn't they have a plan together before they came to us? Instead, it was all of this discussion, in front. Well, the reason is very simple: is open meeting laws.
That's right.
You can't work a bunch of stuff out behind closed doors unless there's very specific things like personnel, hiring and firing, that kind of thing.
Technically, two counselors, no, you help me with this. Two counselors can get together on one-on-one meeting, but if three counselors get together, it is literally a council meeting, and they have to do a public notice, right?
That's correct.
Yeah.
I learned that when I was working over on the board at Region 10. And that goes back to the mayor. That's why the mayor's role is so important. Or whoever the chair of the board is, which is really what the mayor is, that person has to be like a
liaison.
They need to be going around and trying to understand where each person is on a topic, right? Trying to figure out where each person is, and then what it looks like to move that debate forward. And so that's why that's why that role is so important. So, yeah, I mean, I do think sometimes just different personalities in a room will make a difference. I think that if Juan and I, for instance, were to be successful, or Juan and Carl were to be successful, I think just their personalities and who they are, I think you'd see a different, really different thing. The same with me. If I was on, I prize consensus building probably more than I should. I think that it's really important for all voices to be heard. And so and the other thing too to keep in mind, I got to know Michael and Sina and Lloyd really well 2 years ago, right? I mean, we were in all kinds of forums and events together, and I won't say we're buddies, but I know them, they know me. I feel like we can work together without a problem.
You've been fantastic. Neil Williamson sharing some content here. Check out the Free Enterprise Forum. He's got some reports that he's posting that could help with this discussion. He says, multiple folks have said they've enjoyed this discussion, including Grace, including Laura Navarez, including Spencer Burkett. I guess we'll close with this. Give them the why should you vote for Brian Pinkston answer here. Hey, you've been fantastic today.
Well, thank you. I appreciate you having me. You do a really good job of bringing out the best in your interviewees. So I ran 2 years ago and lost by a whisker.
Right.
But one of the things I learned through that process was how much I love the city and how much I love civic engagement. So I think the way I recommend myself to people, and my pitch is this: I'm a project manager. I've been doing project management work for over 30 years. Project managers work in all kinds of different contexts, from manufacturing, I've worked to institutional, to construction, to whatever. And what project managers do is they put people, resources, and ideas together to get things done. It's all about managing stakeholders. It's all about trying to generate consensus, and I think that that's what I would bring. I also, two values that are very important to me are empathy and compassion. And so it's part of my faith, it's part of my philosophical view of the world, and so I would want whatever I do to go through that lens, and that's where I think equity is so important. So,
wish you the best of luck.
Thank you.
Kathy Galvin, I'll throw this to you. Kathy Galvin has offered to moderate a debate.
I heard about that. Yeah.
If we would love to have you.
Yeah, I'd love to be here.
She would host it. It would be fair questions. I initially was going to open it up for everybody, and then I had somebody that I trust reach out to me, and they said, "Why don't we do the debate for the Democrats first? Because the primary the 3rd of June."
The 8th.
The 8th of June.
Yeah.
So we got to get through the Democratic primary first, and then I considered what this individual says. He watches the show, and I put it into play. So we'll do it for the Dems first,
Okay.
and then open one up for the general election.
Okay.
How's the family? You guys doing well?
Yeah, everyone's doing well. You know, I've got 3 young adults who are like ready to get their lives back in gear. You know, we've had a good time reconnecting over the last year, but
More family dinners than ever?
yeah, but you know, everyone's doing well. I'm very, very blessed. But like everyone else, we're ready for life to return to some level of normalcy.
Amen. Brian Pinkston, guys, running for Charlottesville City Council. More with him as we get closer to June 8th. You can tell that he's just a kind, good person, Brian Pinkston. Judah Wighower is our director.
Thanks,
Judah,
Judah.
without you, we wouldn't do this. My name is Jerry Miller. It's the I Love CVille show on a Monday. We will see you tomorrow at 10:15 with Real Talk. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me. Yeah, thanks for having me, man. Appreciate it.